Hello, everybody. I'm Cecelia. Welcome to Cecelia Talks. This is the first official episode. I'm here today with the co-founder and CEO of Off the Record Media, Carson Carpenter.
Thank you very much, Cecilia. No countdown as well. You know what? Hey, we're ready to roll.
We are ready to roll. We did say we were going to record like 3 separate times, and I had to double check everything. So, Carson, you graduated at 19 at ASU. That's a really big achievement. But you were also, president of College Republicans and Turning Point USA at your school. If you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I wasn't with Turning Point, but I was with the College Republicans. We worked a lot with Turning Point, and none of that's important. But to dive into it, yes, I was shouted out by President Trump on stage here at ASU for the work that we did for bringing out younger generation of voters to vote for him in record numbers in 2024. We brought in the frats, we brought in the sororities. I've worked in government, I've worked for Senate candidates, I've worked for gubernatorial candidates. I've really been a Swiss Army knife throughout the political spectrum, and now I'm obviously more into the political commentating area. And I think the reason I started all this, because that's probably your follow up
Yeah,
question,
what drove you
is
into being
because
in media?
I grew up in a smaller town in northern Arizona. My dad was a stuntman. My mom worked at a smaller private university for flight, and I actually wanted to be a pilot growing up. And it allowed me to be very technical, but also work very hard for what I have. And I realized nothing was truly impossible from a very young age, and I just really stuck to it and reached for it.
You see, like, online especially, like, a lot of the political commentators, talk about only that they wanted to be a political commentator and nothing ever before. So I think it's a great example that you're bringing up that you did have other goals besides just going into politics immediately. But speaking of political commentators, I've noticed a lot of political commentators on both the left and right have been saying that they get disenfranchised at their universities and their colleges because they're political commentators. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of scapegoating to necessarily justify their ineffectiveness. A lot of times you see that with chapters and places where they're already disparaged. They're not very popular anyway. They don't have a lot of influence, and that's how they try to garner that attention. I also think, just like I said before, you have to have the tenacity. You have to work towards what goals you're actually setting out. And as a young conservative group on campus, you're not going to be known as the very popular, the very in with the nines type of deal with people, because it isn't as cool to be conservative. It was for a little bit in 2024. Now it's frankly not as much. And so when you hear these stories, yes, obviously they're getting targeted. And I was targeted at ASU. We never got funding, we never got anything else, but you make it work. And there's ways to get around those rules. And, the true effective ones do, and the ineffective people don't.
Yeah, and I think that's very true, especially like being, in college Republicans. I've noticed it has not disenfranchised me from anything I want to do on my college campus. My professors treat me the same. I think a lot of people use it because they don't get good grades and they want something to blame besides their own work ethic. And I think that's a big problem within. I'd say the right does this a little bit more, but you notice that the right will blame their college for them not doing good, for them not being well liked. And it's like maybe you're just not a friendly, nice person. I don't know if you agree with that, but that's been my experience at my university. Like I play a sport, had no problem being in a sport, being part of College Republicans, and now being the vice president of my Turning Point USA chapter. I've never had a problem going anywhere on campus. Everyone's treated me the exact same as they would anyone else. So I think sometimes, I've noticed with the right that a lot of people have a victim mentality. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, the victim mentality is getting really tiring, and it's honestly really annoying. I hate it because you see so many people on the right just defending their virtues by association of like their own guilt. It's a weird paradigm that we're in, where you're on a college campus and people will try to defend, their traditional values, their whatever else that they bring from home. And the second they get questioned on it, they scapegoat to, you're targeting me, you're doing this, you're doing that. And it's like, no, A lot of those people just came from really liberal and stupid areas, and that's okay. Like, you have to be stronger than that and push back and fight back against those people. And usually it's not very pretty. Usually they're very, very hostile towards you. And it's just, are you born for the moment or are you not? Like, if you're not, don't go to college, go work a trades job, go work and have a nice, quiet life because, Sunny Pines is calling your name at the end of your life. Or you can work, work, work like a workhorse until you're 75 years old, trying to cause a difference in whatever you want to do. And most of those liberals on college campuses won't do that, but they act like they'll do that. And so that's the difference in mentality.
Yeah, and speaking of working until you're 75, I want to talk about affordability a little bit with you. There was an old clip, probably about a year ago now, where Ben Shapiro said that, young people, if they can't afford to live where they were born, they need to move. What do you think about the current state of affordability in our country?
Yeah, well, if Ben Shapiro's saying that, he should move back to Israel and never come back. I think that would be the biggest justice he could do to our country. He can maybe also go fight in the IDF if he wants to as well, because I don't know if you know this, but there are more Jewish born Americans and even Israeli born Americans that go fight for the IDF than they do for our own military. So it's rich talking about affordability coming from Ben Shapiro. But then also with Little Hat Ben, you have to mention if he's saying stuff like this about affordability, he's only doing it from a talking mouthpiece, right? I saw a clip of Ben Shapiro about a week ago talking about the NBA Finals and bringing up next gen stats and all of this other stuff, all this slop that nobody cares about. And I'm like, do people actually think that Ben Shapiro is watching the NBA Finals and tracking next gen stats and rifling them off one by one on a video? No, he's being force fed everything he's saying at this point. So when you hear these figures like Ben Shapiro, even bigger people, even Michael Knowles, I like Michael, but he's out of touch from reality. You hear the most like based opinions about affordability from people that are millionaires. It makes no sense. Why don't you actually talk to people like us who struggle to pay rent, struggle to pay tuition, have to take out 25% interest loans, among other things? It's totally stupid. So I think hearing it from him and people like him just destroy our sense of reality.
And I think with college students, especially, I know I can speak from personal experience. My mother's a teacher, my stepdad's in trades, right? Because my stepdad makes more than my mother, right? Combining their two incomes, I don't qualify for any sort of financial aid. I'm paying back all of my college by myself, right? I
Hmm.
don't think step parents should be included when we do financial aid. I think another big problem with the affordability crisis, if you live somewhere like New York, for example, New York is so expensive to live in. We have people like Kathy Hochul who claims that she cares about everyone, in our great state, but you really don't see anything getting done. And speaking of New York as well, I think it was about 10 Zoran back candidates just won in New York. Do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, I think Kathy Hochul's a mess. I think we saw Andrew Cuomo at his peak being the best for New York. I know that's kind of
Ooh,
weird to say.
no, no. Andrew
Compared to
Cuomo.
every other governor recently, yeah, and city official. Look, if you have Kathy Hochul and Zoran Mondani, it's a lot worse now than it was under Cuomo, even during COVID. Imagine if Hochul was the governor under COVID. She was the lieutenant governor, I believe, right? Or she held
She was
some
in
high
some
position.
position in office. I know that Andrew Cuomo, like, especially being from New York, Andrew Cuomo's always been a mess. He's always been unlikable. And then with his scandal, especially blaming being Italian when half of New York is Italian. So that was just crazy. But yeah, no, Andrew also sucked. I would say we haven't had anyone good since I've been alive, like since I can remember.
Yeah, and I would have to say with the 10 Zoran candidates winning those races, it's going to be a slippery slope effect of we saw Jonathan Carl the other day ask Zoran, "Hey, do you think the Constitution should be changed to allow you to run for president?" Obviously, Zoran's going to say no, but the fact that the media is doing that type of disservice to the American people is egregious because what that's going to do is if Democrats ever take control of power, they're going to start flaunting that out again. and it's not going to be that radical. We've already made gay marriage legal. You really think letting a non citizen run for president is that much more radical? It obviously isn't. And so in 2028, you're going to see a big push for that. And this is just the start of it. People that are winning because of Zoran's endorsements is going to make that legislation more and more likely. And it's really a big problem.
I think my biggest problem, and something that I've heard a lot talked about and I think is actually occurring, is that the Democratic Party is now switching to a more socialist movement. Right? So you have Zoran, who, is openly admitting that he enjoys socialist policies, but you have these candidates who also openly admit that they enjoy socialist policies and are now running under the Democratic Party and waiting until they can finally become their own independent established party big enough where they could make some major disruptions in future elections. How do you think that's going to affect the political climate in the next upcoming years?
Yeah, I think they're not necessarily going to try to form their own party. I think they're just going to try to control and take over the Democrat Party. I think we're really going to start seeing the backsliding in 2028. It's not even going to be in 2026. What you're going to see in this election is a lot of those people being implanted in for their first term. It looks very reminiscent of the late 1980s when we saw a whole new batch, the youngest Congress ever. I think you're going to see something like that again. You're going to see a younger Congress being inserted in this next election. And so, what you're going to see in the following election is a big change of political power, especially in Washington, where these newer, younger, established candidates and people that are running for their second term are going to actually start introducing legislation that's going to radicalize the Democrat Party, but it's going to radicalize our nation, just like how we saw in the early 90s. And that's why you saw the election, I believe, of 92 or 96 when Ross Perot ran as a third party candidate because of just the vast amount of political change that occurred during that time period. I have a feeling we're going to see a reminiscent time coming up ahead in our country, just like how we saw back then.
I think it's really interesting to watch as well. Only because being from New York, right? It's such a different state depending on where you live. Living somewhere like upstate compared to New York City is two different places. And like I've talked to my friends about this, and we say that sometimes, upstate New York is a little more south than the actual south, right? You go to places like Atlanta, and upstate New York is more south than Atlanta. Or you go to places like Miami, upstate New York is more south than Miami. So I think it's going to be very, very interesting. I know they talked about this years ago about making New York City its own separate little thing. I don't think that'll ever happen. But how New York City is going to impact the rest of New York over the following years. I mean, I personally don't feel like we're ever going to really have a Republican in office in New York for, to replace someone like Kathy Hochul because of the current state of affairs of places like New York City, where you have over 6 million people voting compared to the rest of upstate.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you there. I think, just like I said before, the Zoran problem is going to continue and it's going to spread nationwide. So buckle in, New York.
Yeah, so I just want to switch the topic up a little bit. I know we talked about this in the last episode before it got scrapped by OBS failing on me. But, you see people like Matt Nuclear recently popping up, these plants inside of the right wing movement. What what do you think that conservatives and Republicans could do to avoid, falling for that trap?
I mean, they really need to rally around people like myself, not somebody who has an Afro acorn on the top of his head, right? And can't even debate coherently. Whenever you see a clip of Matt Nuclear, the only nuclear reaction you see is a failed one because he's a failed nuclear reaction. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He went on Jubilee with my good friend Dennis. He made a fool of himself in front of Parker and Dean, and he just totally larped that he's this black conservative that's standing up to the narrative that the white oppressor in this country is destroying the black community, like it's 2014, like it's the Tea Party all over again. people that are reiterating these talking points, most people don't fall for anymore. And that's why Matt Nuclear's show has no ratings, it has no viewership, it has no nothing. In fact, the Daily Wire's not going to pay this guy because he's in his dark room in his little goon cave, has a $25 gaming headset, and he goes on and debates people about topics like, oh, do you think the white oppressor is destroying my race? And then they'll say, yeah, I think, white people tend to marginalize black people. And then Matt Nuclear just goes off on his failed nuclear reaction and says, oh, actually, no, the white oppressor doesn't do anything in this country. It's total slop. Like, who would even watch it? It's so sad that the Daily Wire has gotten to this point. And like I said, people just need to rally around people like myself that are independent creators, that are entrepreneurs, because what the hell has Matt Nuclear ever created? Nothing. And
Yeah.
so just these people that are plants, they have nothing on their resume. Would you ever trust a candidate that has nothing on their resume? Absolutely not. So why are people putting their trust in these people? I don't think it'll happen. And so, unfortunately, for guys like Matt Nuclear and David Mauricio, they're going to be out in the next year on the street with no job because nobody trusted them because they were put in.
I think my biggest problem with people like Matt Nuclear who come into this space is, besides obviously knowing you're paid, so I'm not going to listen to a word you say, right? You might as well just, tattoo the Daily Wire on your forehead and everyone would scurry away. But if you're going to talk about issues, debate over systematic issues, you need to have some prior knowledge in the topic, like you said. And listening to him speak based off the 2 Instagram clips I've gotten, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He has no real interest in the topic whatsoever, right? And you could ask anyone in the political sphere who actually commentates or likes talking about these issues, is you actually have to put time into everything you're doing, right? You don't have the option to sit there and be like, oh, well, this is how I kind of feel, like I haven't read anything. And you notice people like Matt Nuclear doing that a lot. On top of that, I want to talk about the $25 gaming setup because I'm going to be honest, it is not that hard to get a decent setup, right? Currently, I have my $30 Amazon mic that's working perfectly fine. I have my $35, webcam, and I have my $100 second monitor, right? I know the Daily Wire check is good enough where he can get something good, but I think to preserve him being authentic, they're going to keep up the idea that, oh, he's this kid, he's a college kid streaming from his room. And I think the Daily Wire has done, I'll give them props for that, a decent job trying to make him look authentic, but they haven't really actually shown anything out of Matt Nuclear.
Oh, yeah. No. Guy's a total joke. I mean, if we could just be serious, nobody is ever watching his show. And if they are, they're all boomer geriatric people. Hop on Social Security, and watch the Matt Nuclear show, and then they tune into Hannity after. That's the average day for a Matt Nuclear viewer. And so those are the audience that I don't even want, right? So me saying, oh, those people should trust in me, I'm kind of walking back my comments now because I know my viewers are extremely intelligent and super smart. And I just thought the average Matt Nuclear viewer is going to be a very low IQ person. So I'm going to have to walk back that comment I said earlier.
All right. So, speaking of people like Matt Nuclear, who do you think is actively hurting the movement? The right-leaning, more Republican conservative movement.
Yeah, I would say Ben Shapiro at this point. His time has passed. He doesn't really help much of anything now. The only Ben Shapiro fans I meet are very interesting people. He
I have to
attracts a
agree
very
with
interesting
that.
crowd.
Yeah. And they never have good social skills. I've noticed anyone who was a Ben Shapiro fan at TPUSA, I would try to have a simple conversation with them, and it was just they've never seen a woman outside. They've only ever seen their mother.
No, I think that's a reaction of the show, a nuclear reaction. If you watched his show, you would never talk to a woman. You would never have any social skills. You don't have any debate skills. You're not a very smart person. And then you just listen to these BS talking points. That's going to hurt the movement. That allows you to be stagnant. And they're trying to file for a $2 billion IPO. Nobody's going to pay that. So, like I said on the last episode that got cut out, if you want some financial advice from me, literally buy the short on Daily Wire when their IPO goes public, and you'll become rich like me. So, yeah, it's just that's really all I can say about that subject. Is it's just like you know who to trust and who not to, right? Just use your own discretion.
And then people who you think are helping the movement.
I think Nick Fuentes is. Look, I don't agree with everything that he says, obviously, right? The way that he says stuff can not be the most appeasing for every audience, but it's not words they haven't heard their entire life. So let's calm down on the entire rhetoric about him. And besides mobilizing the Groypers, which is the top incels in the world, I think. There are some really good people that do take inspiration from him that I've talked to and the rest of the movement. They kind of have to be shadowy about admitting that they watch him. But he's very articulate, he's very smart, and he's somebody that's trying to create a positive impact where the counter is like a Ben Shapiro. He's not inspiring you to intellectually think and go out and do something, where at least Nick is getting that off the ground. And just like I said, I don't agree with everything he says. Obviously, he doesn't agree with everything everybody else says because we're human. But I would say he's somebody among other people that channel that same type of dialogue are really helping the movement.
Yeah, on my personal list, I would also include like people like Nikki Rudd and Jeb Baugh, who,
Yeah.
Nikki Rudd. I was there live. I was there live at the Ben Shapiro incident, and let me tell you, that was probably like one of the funniest things to witness in my entire life. Ben Shapiro being scared of what, a 22, 23-year-old kid asking him a question about a historic event. You can't ask about no one can talk about the USS Liberty. Don't forget that, guys. No one can talk about the USS Liberty without being, some different label, right? It's a historical event. It happened. Are we not allowed to talk about it anymore? I'm very confused.
Yeah, the USS Liberty, the Holocaust, the whatever you want to call it. Nobody ever talks about the Armenian genocide among many other genocides, but yet we were mandatory to learn about the Holocaust in our schools. It's a very interesting paradigm considering it happened in Europe and it wasn't something directly correlated with our country that we're mandatory having to learn about it is interesting. We barely learn about the Japanese internment camps that were in our country during the
I
1940s.
don't think I learned
And
about
it,
that in school at all. I'm not
no,
gonna lie. I found that out when I was a freshman in college. I've always been
yeah,
into
and
politics. I literally found that out when I was a freshman in college. I was like, what do you mean this happened? Why do people never talk about it? Why is it never brought up? And why is it swept under the rug?
it's so stupid. I just literally hate our education system. I hope it gets defunded. I hope it gets thrown into some other department. That's what I've said on my lives is I'm like, no, defund the Department of Education, get rid of it and throw it in the Department of Interior. One, it'll have access to way more money. Two, it'll have way more oversight and auditing with the money. And three, we learn about the Holocaust in our schools, yet we don't learn about the internment camps that we had. We don't learn a lot about our own nation's history, and especially how we got off the gold standard, how we implemented our currency. That's kind of important to live your daily life. Instead, we spend 4 weeks on the Holocaust learning about all the atrocities that had nothing to do with America. Like, it makes no sense at all. And so I mean, if I was in charge of our education, I would teach our students how to use our money instead of 4 weeks of um, Holocaust pendling.
I'm not 100% sure how the education system works. I'm not going to lie, I'm not going to be one of those people, but I believe it's based on state, right? Because New York State has Common Core. I don't know what like Arizona has. But as much as I'm someone who wants to return something to the States, I've noticed that if you talk to people from different areas, right, they get a completely different narrative of what has occurred in history based off of where they live.
Yeah, absolutely. If I'm meeting a student in Chicago, I know some people, they don't know a lot about history. In fact, they don't know a lot about a lot of things. But when it comes to somebody who's from a rural area, it tends to be they do a lot more research. It tends to be they actually figure out the answers because they feel so distant from this history and they feel so ingrained with it because our country was founded on a rural foundation that I notice the IQ levels jump 10 points when I go to rural areas compared to city centers. And that's not how it should be. Our cities should be the hallmark of excellence, and we've lost that.
I can't. Yeah, I agree with you. Um, I know at least where I live, you see a large problem with drugs and violence and things like that. I mean, the city I live in, recently we had a man that had his hands cut off by a man with a machete. I don't know quite the reason why, but I don't really think that matters, to be honest with you. I mean, he literally cut another person's hands off with a machete and is on the run currently. But you see, our cities have become this epidemic of, violence and crime.
Yeah, and I think there's a bigger problem to dive into, and a lot of people get uncomfortable talking about it, but it's ethnic makeup in these areas, right? You have groups of people that are very tribalistic with each other, and there's almost an ethno nationalism aspect of it, except these minority groups don't have any influencers or leaders or people to guide them in a good direction. And it's very intentional the way that they do that. I don't think it's by a mistake that the black community in the south side of Chicago doesn't have their next MLK or their next outstanding citizen to bring them out, because once those people do get propped up, they forget where they came from. Look at Obama. Look at MLK, for example. Look at all these other historical figures. They don't have a pride of nationalism with their culture like they claim to publicly, right? Obama's always like, oh, I'm the champion for the black community, yet literally did nothing for them while in office. He didn't provide any opportunity, he didn't provide them any zones that would help them be brought up and be built up. So I think what we have to do is start calling out how there's lack of leaders for the Hispanic community, for the black community, among others, and it's not in a racist way. In fact, it's done in a oversight way that will hopefully allow for these communities to get better.
I know, like, my take on the issue with the cities and violence has always been there's a difference between, people who live in the city and people who are deeply involved in the city culture, right? So you have people in the city who go to their job every day, add value to society, but there's also people who get caught up in the gang violence and the crime and the drugs that are throughout our cities, that are rapidly spreading. And it's honestly sad. It's honestly sad. I don't ever want to see an American citizen suffering, right? I never want to see anyone be in that position. But you see time and time again, they elect a new mayor in these cities and nothing changes. I'm going to fix everything. Nothing changes.
Yeah, it's totally their own doing in a lot of cases. And I think blacks and Hispanics and even a lot of liberal women have destroyed this country.
Speaking about women, you recently said that women shouldn't be able to vote.
Yeah, my perfect case study would be today with Amy Coney Barrett. I have a bone to pick with her. She, in the Supreme Court case, ruled 5-4 and wrote the majority opinion of why we should let people vote up until the day of the election with mail in ballots. As long as they postmark their mail in ballot for election day, they can be sent in 5 days after and still be counted, right? So she is quite literally the entire reason why we will never have a clean or fair election ever again. And she is the only person that is insinuating that we are letting our election system slip, that we are letting minorities in these inner cities, which by the way have more access than any rural population in the United States, to go vote, to go eat food, to go live their normal life. And you have a person, a woman, Amy Coney Barrett, who literally destroyed our sacred right to vote today. And then tomorrow morning is the ruling on birthright citizenship. That's going to be safeguarded and it's not going to ever be able to be overturned, because I know it's going to be a 6-3 vote or 7-2 vote. And she's going to be on board as well as the other The other Justice Gorsuch will probably be on board with that. And it's just a disgrace. Like a lot of times, stats show it. Every time women have voted in an election, they have voted predominantly for Democrats. And if women were not able to vote, it would be a 107-year empire of Republican rule. And that's why in our current society, we don't see empires anymore. We don't see truly strong countries be able to get rebuilt. So, yes, I did say the controversial opinion of, oh, women shouldn't vote. Obviously, that's never, ever going to happen. They're never going to have that right removed. I'm just doing a thought experiment, a simple thought experiment, where our country would be in better hands if they weren't able to vote. No offense.
Don't you think it's kind of backwards though? Don't you think it's discrediting women who do vote? I mean, who do vote Republican? Because I know that's the main driving force behind it.
No, not necessarily, because a lot of times women tend to have a lot more, how do I put this? A lot more pathos into their vote, essentially, a lot more emotional connection when it comes to what they vote for. A lot of times it's not based off of common sense. That's why you see abortion legislation be so popular with women, is because it gives them the illusion of more control, even though it doesn't really. It doesn't give them more self autonomy, right? Because if men could do that with stuff in their surrounding circle by circumstances, then that would not be allowed at all. That would, in fact, be illegal. So I think with the women vote, it's not necessarily a net positive to our nation to allow a blanket majority of women vote, because a majority of them vote against the best common sense values for our country. And you have a whole history going back to 1919 that shows that.
I think we're gonna agree to disagree on that one. I'm not gonna
And that's
lie.
okay.
Yeah, I
I
think
I mean, I don't expect you to say, oh, no, I'd rather give up my right to vote. I'm just saying, as a thought experiment, of course, it's never going to happen. Our country would be in a better off position. Like, categorically, that's a fact. Like, a lot of legislation that has destroyed this country wouldn't even be passed. It wouldn't have even went through. So that's just my take on it.
I feel like I don't know. I just think if you're born in the United States and you're a citizen, or you are a citizen of the United States, you should be able to vote. You know, I we're gonna agree to disagree on that one. I don't know. I like my right to vote. I think I should be able to vote. Obviously, you don't,
Yeah, but you
but
wouldn't be naive enough to be like, most women your age vote to destroy the country, right?
I don't necessarily see. The thing is, I don't know where a lot of women my age lie in politics.
It's like
Based on my
85 to 15.
based on my, the area I live in, the school I go to, who I surround myself with. I don't think their intention is to ever destroy our country. I think that they're attempting to do what is best, and I feel like it'd be disingenuous for me to say that they actively want to destroy our country.
I mean, yeah, you don't know what their intentions are, but don't you think their carelessness for voting for these disgusting policies is also an injustice to everybody else's vote? Like,
I
somebody
think
like me who actually intelligently votes is getting canceled out by 20 liberal women that are actively voting for free abortions everywhere, and all these city buses that allow bums to just get paraded through my neighborhood. That's actively destroying my lifestyle.
I think it's an issue when people are implementing, those sorts of policies. I actually don't necessarily have a problem with free busing because I know a lot of people don't pay for it. I know that's a really hot take. I know a lot of people who don't pay for the subway, right? I'm it hasn't been getting paid for a while. So to me, the 10% that does pay doesn't really, oh, okay, they pay, right? That doesn't quite bother me that much, only because a lot of areas where there is a subway system, that subway system replaces school buses who would come to pick kids up. A lot of kids have to take the subway to get to school, and there is a discounted rate for those students, but there's also students who will never go through that process to get it. Whatever. That's a whole separate thing. I don't I just that's not my top line concern, right? when voting. Who's gonna make the buses and subway free? I I think that's one of the great things about this country is that people do have the freedom to vote for who they want, and I might not always agree with it, and I might think that they're hurting the country, but there's also a handful of liberal men who vote for policies that would go against where we both stand, when we go to the voting booth.
Yeah, we call those homosexuals for the most part. Those liberal men that vote for those policies. That's what you call Dean Withers and Parker and Harry Sisson. That's what those people are.
Well, to be fair, Dean just always wants to put himself in a gay man's shoes. I mean, I like
Yeah, he's said it. I mean, he always continues to reiterate it. It's really weird. It's fascinating that he claims to have a girlfriend. I just don't believe
does
that
he?
at all.
I thought he was like gay.
Oh, a girl? Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
oh
well,
no.
and gay.
Well, I thought he
Probably
was
both.
gay. Didn't he talk about reading like Wattpad fan fiction about like gay men recently?
Yeah, that's the same guy who told me after I debated him I need to read more, and I said, "You literally watch and read fan fiction. Like, what is wrong with you? Like, you're such a degenerate human being." And he's probably on TikTok live right now debating like all day. It's like, how does this guy even have any debate skills? You've never done anything tangible in real life except sell fake horses and money spread on private jets because of your rich conservative parents. It's just it amazes me who's famous and who's not in this world.
I'm a little confused on that one because to my knowledge, didn't he used to LARP as like an Andrew Tate sort of guy before he got into the whole political sphere?
Oh yeah, yeah, he's a total grifter. And like I said, when people call people grifters, it's admitting a level of success because I wouldn't be calling him a grifter if he was unsuccessful. But he definitely is a grifter in the way that he fakes it. It's an act. It's theatrics, right? And so he claims to get offended by these words and terms that would never actually affect him, right? If someone calls him the F word, why would he be offended by that if he isn't one, right? It makes no sense. It's virtue signaling, it's white knighting, and that's what these liberal men do all the time to protect women. That's what they're doing because they're so helpless and they don't have equal rights that they're there to protect them. It's such a weird interaction.
I have noticed there is a large infantilization of women on the left, especially that women can't make their own choices or have their own opinions, so men need to stand up for them, right? And it's like, if when we're talking about women's issues, right, and you're like, well, I speak for all women. No, you don't, though. No, you don't. I would never say I speak for all women because I don't. Each person's their own individual with their own individual opinion, and it's honestly, it kind of irks me when people do that, especially in debates where they're like, "Well, I'm speaking for a majority of women," but you're not though. You don't know a majority of women. You know your five closest friends, and that isn't the entire world.
Yeah, that's a heavy burden to carry if you're going to say you're speaking for all women. That's just never going to be true. And yeah, I mean, I just hate the virtue signaling. But yeah, you said it eloquently.
So I want to talk about the war in Iran and kind of like your opinion on what's been going on recently. This deal's been on and off again. It's kind of hard to keep track of. You read one headline from 2 days ago, and there's been so much that's changed in the last 2 days. So what's your take on what's currently happening?
Yeah, it's just a mess. It's slowly going out of the news, like the Ukraine Russia scandal. I believe that the war in Iran is essentially over. I think there's been some hiccups with negotiating about the Strait of Hormuz and such, and that'll continue probably for the rest of the year. I think the biggest thing that we learned, though, was creating a foreign policy apparatus of going in and forcefully removing regimes is not going to be that popular on the world stage. In fact, it's only gave Africa more ground to gain with China because they're able to build more infrastructure, more schools, more bridges, more jobs for these African migrants who have nothing in these countries, right? They have dirt huts and they have Mr. Beast water wells, and that's about it. But you have China going into these countries, building all this infrastructure for them and getting them into insane amount of debts, and that's allowing China to essentially control all of Africa, and the United States is falling behind. We're not doing any of that. We're not doing any nation building, but it's a preemptive nation building, not a nation building of a country that we just sought to take over. And so you're going to see in Iran, we're going to give them humanitarian aid packages, probably to the tune of a couple hundred billion. And it's going to go absolutely nowhere. And we're going to lose ground in the Middle East to China, to Russia, to even Israel. Israel's going to try to distance from us. You've already seen Netanyahu do that. And I don't think it would necessarily be a bad thing, but mitigate the other threats if you're going to do it. So that's where this war is going to go. It's going to go on into oblivion, and most people are going to forget about it.
I think it's definitely an issue, you know, when you look at what's been occurring. I mean, we can't get a deal. We can't get a straight answer out of either country. Um, you know, we have our greatest ally causing issues for us when we go to try to sign the deal as well. And I don't think Israel will ever distance itself from the United States. I recently wrote about this, but I think Israel is an unofficial 51st state of the United States with how much they are involved in even our regular politics. I mean, you have people going literally to every single meeting asking, "Well, what's your opinion on Israel? Where would you go visit?" I mean, look at the NYC mayor race. You have people saying, "I would go to Israel. The first place I would go visit is Israel." What does Israel have to do with you being the mayor of New York City? What does Israel have to do with you being a mayor of a small town in Florida? It's insanity. It's insanity. I think they've caused nothing but problems, for our country recently. I think that on top of that, you know, they can't bomb a country for more than one day. And Benjamin Netanyahu's sitting in his office starting to tweak, getting itchy when he's like, I haven't bombed Lebanon in 2 days. I don't know what I'm gonna do. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous, and I think it's causing more problems for us than good. And I think them being one of our allies has done nothing but hurt the United States. I mean, half the world hates us because of it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think it's definitely distanced us from the rest of the world. Look at most of Europe, they don't respect us. They don't necessarily see us as a threat anymore, which they should see us as a threat. Like in the Trump first term, we were threatening to pull out of NATO every other day. We don't do that anymore. We don't do any of the stuff that gave us the moxie of the first Trump administration foreign policy. And you're starting to see the lacking results of it is you're not seeing hardline deals getting done. You're not seeing anything move with pace, and you're seeing half-ass measures throughout this entire administration. We can't even get the SAVE Act passed. We can't even get a deal done in Iran, even though we had the JCPOA from 2015. We should be able to get a deal together in 6 months with a bow wrapped on it. And then if you look at the Ukraine Russia war, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people have died out there because of somebody's inaction, which was all of Europe, to protect the oil resources that they had, especially continuing to buy US oil to buy Russian oil and use the pipeline that got blown up. And so you just see all of these failures culminating, and it's really done on themselves. Europe's inaction and lack of discretion has been the United States problem, yet we're not doing anything to help bail it out, which kind of leaves a conflict in my head. It's like, oh, should we bail them out? Should we not? I think there's a way that we could do it where we force their hand, and we haven't played those cards yet. So to add on to your point, that's how I see our foreign policy situation.
Yeah, and I just don't want things to be a mess anymore. I don't. I'm done. I'm tired. Gas is what, 4.50 here, you know, and
Wow.
we're running out of like our emergency oil supply, right? And we're gonna see gas prices
Yep.
skyrocket up to whatever price they decide. That's the thing, and it's gonna take a while to come back down too. They said that gas probably wouldn't be under $3 until 2027.
Yeah, like that'll even ever happen again. I don't think gas will dip below $3, like median, like nationwide average. I'm sure in like Houston, Texas, it's probably already under $3 because that's where the refineries are. But I think, yeah, I'm done with it all as well. I mean, every morning I wake up and see headlines and it's just like, wow, what are we doing? We're losing the grip of our country so quick. And not to sound black pilled, but this week I'm gonna be because of the Supreme Court rulings. You're not gonna see a base decision from any of it. If they rule birthright citizenship to be removed, that is the single biggest Supreme Court win in our nation's history. I don't care about Roe v. Wade, truthfully, compared to that decision, right? Obviously, it was a big impact. There's still abortions happening in our country at record numbers. Millions and millions of people are still dying. So it was effective, but it wasn't the end all be all. Ending birthright citizenship would be the end all be all, and it would save our country.
Yeah, birthright citizenship is still something that I'm developing an opinion on, right? I'm never going to be one of those people who's like, I 100% feel some sort of way. I'm still looking into it a little bit more because, sometimes there's like a little bit of like conflicting information going on. So that's something. But where I'm leaning currently is that I think there's a lot of problems with it. You see someone who's not from here and their child gets American citizenship and they want to stay here. That's a huge issue for me, right?
Yeah.
I don't think it's an issue if, the child's born here, they have American citizenship, but they also have another citizenship and they go back to that original country and wait until, green card and everything, and then they immigrate over here and they assimilate properly. I don't think that's an issue. But I do see there's a lot more harm occurring than good in our country
Yeah.
with birthright citizenship. I know that's probably like a very base level entry take, but it's something that, I personally have to do a little more research in, but that's like what I've formed over the last like 2 weeks.
Yeah, we're the only developed nation in the world that essentially uses birthright citizenship besides some other irrelevant country. It's like New Zealand or Iceland or whatever, and maybe another one. Most countries don't adopt birthright citizenship. Most first world countries don't. It's just a way to have a broken immigration system because you allow loopholes for third worlders to come in. And what I mean by third worlders is anybody that isn't from our country, essentially, because I look at the US as the top standard, even though we're a second world nation. Sadly, that needs to change. But when you look at our immigration system and the loopholes with it, birthright citizenship's the number one system to allow the elites of third world shitholes to essentially have vacant properties in our nation, crime rings, all of these disgusting businesses we don't want. That's why 30% of Manhattan lays vacant is because of birthright citizenship of rich billionaires from the Middle East and India and China and all these other nations buy up property in the United States and take it away from our citizens. That needs to end, and it needs to end hopefully tomorrow morning.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be something really interesting to see, and I think I'm actually going to cover it on my next show, what occurs out of that, what
Good.
happens. I think it will definitely be interesting. Um, But yeah, I agree with you. It is a problem when we have people who are not living in this country buying up property and not living in it. And that is a huge problem I've noticed, as well as I'm against any big corporation or anyone who's not actively living in this country buying up single family homes or single family units.
Yeah, they should be prosecuted to the full extent of law for fraud, for corruption, for multiple things, even treason. If there's a way that you could angle it and show that it's disparaging the people of our nation, I think that's a law that has been totally forgotten in our country is treason, right? Punishable by death. We don't see it enacted anymore, like at all. Even though most of our politicians, whenever they get kicked out or censured, they never get any political or actual prosecution upon them for treasonous acts versus the United States. I think that needs to start happening again. And most people would call it too harsh or an invirtue to our justice system. I think it's the most set law of the land. And we saw our nation take care of those people back when it first founded. If they didn't do that, we would have had a nation of traitors, of treasonous people, and people who would have destroyed our country. So I think that needs to start happening again.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, you never really see it used, but you see it happen more often than not. And we also see,
Yeah.
people going into place, right, in political positions of power saying that they ran out of napkins, so they wiped their hands with the American flag. I also think that's a massive issue. If you want to run for office in this country, no matter what party you're in, you should be loving America. You should love the country you're running in. And on top of that, you should be wanting what's best for America. So you telling me that you're wiping your hands on the American flag, automatic turn off. No interest in voting for you. Disrespecting our flag, no interest for voting for you. And I do think it's something that we need to highlight and point out more.
Agree.
Yeah, so I think that's going to wrap up the episode. If you have any closing comments you want to add on.
Yeah, I would say this was a great first episode of your show. Look, you got through some of the roadblocks that were in the way. You got a very nice setup now. I like it a lot. Really good lighting. So I'm looking forward to see where the show goes. And don't be afraid to reach out to any big people. Let me know if you need contacts or people to come on your show. But yeah, I think you conducted the interview very well, even from the last time that you interviewed me. So keep it up.
Thank you so much, Carson. Well, I hope the viewers at home enjoyed this episode. Welcome to the first episode of Cecelia Talks. God bless America. God bless everyone watching. And I hope everyone has a great night.